employees and billions in the bank. Well, I have news for you. You do. Jamaica belongs to you, and you need expert protection to safeguard those assets for your future, your children, and your children's children. And you already have it. A key protector is our Auditor General, whose role is outlined by the biggest, baddest law in all the land, the Constitution. The Auditor General's main job is to examine the financial reports of all public entities to ensure that they are accurate and that public funds are used appropriately and effectively to deliver public goods and services without waste, theft, and mismanagement. Here's how it's done.
Are there any apologies for absence? I know we have members Sibley's and Charles who are joining remotely. Member Cousins is here in the precincts of the Parliament. He was here at 10 and I expect him to be back shortly. Do we have any other apologies? No.
Yes,
no.
Chair.
Yes.
Yes, Chair. Member Morrison.
Okay,
is
Carencia
trying to
Morrison.
join.
Okay,
He's trying
thank
to
you.
join, but having some technical difficulties.
Okay. All right, so Member Morrison. I'll forego my opening remarks and I'll go straight to the minutes. I'll take the minutes as read. Can I have a motion for the confirmation of the minutes? So moved by Member Clark, seconded by Member Guy. Are there any matters arising from the minutes that any member wants to bring to the attention of the committee? Yes.
There were two matters that were highlighted. One was the matter with the Finman, whether it was working or not. The Finman system at the Ministry of Health, there was the concern, and it was reported to the PSC that the system wasn't working for a particular period of time. Hence, the delay.
Member Guy, we have a update which I had planned to take in AOB, just in the interest of time. But
So
there's a response from the Financial Secretary.
I can wait until then.
Yeah, let's take it in AOB, okay?
Okay.
Any other matters arising, members? Okay. Let me now move and let me ask the Auditor General if you could introduce your team.
Chair? Yeah. Good morning, Chair and members. With me this morning is Audit Principal Christopher Hare. Beside Christopher, to his left, is Gail Lulim, Deputy Auditor General. And accompanying the team is Wendy Ducasse and Sharice Linton.
Thank you. I know there's a team from the Ministry of Finance. It's normally Mrs. Blake. Oh, sorry, you changed your hair. Sorry, my apologies. Go ahead, Miss. Oh, come. Well, you need to come where there's a microphone. Sorry, the member corrected me. It's the style that has changed. It's the same here. So I'm told. So I think I'm not going to get myself in trouble, so I will say no more on this topic.
Morning, Chairman and members. Hope Blake, Deputy Financial Secretary, and with me is Barrington Thomas, who is head of the Financial Systems Unit.
Thank you, Madam Permanent Secretary. I'll invite you to introduce the team from the ministry, and then Mr. Hunter can introduce the team from NWA.
Trying to see if, does it? Okay. Thank you so much, Chair, morning members. With me today are Mrs. Janet Coleman Howlett, Senior Director, Works Policy Research and Monitoring, Ms. Monique Gibbs, Senior Director, Strategic Planning, Performance Monitoring, Evaluation and Risk Management. Ms. Leandra Trotman, Senior Technical Coordinator. These are from the Central Ministry. And from the National Works Agency, we have right beside me here, Mr. Everton Hunter, who is CEO, Mr. Varden Downer, Senior Director, Project Implementation, and Mr. Orland Simpson, Strategy Development Officer. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Madam Auditor General, as usual, I'll ask you to give some opening remarks, and then I'll ask the Permanent Secretary or the CEO to give their opening remarks too.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I'll be brief. The report that is before you is in relation to NAA's management of Jamaica's main roads. We sought to determine whether the NAAC performed in a manner that was cost-effective. NAA. Cost-effective and agile in accordance with relevant policies and guidelines to achieve the value for money, and the national strategic vision for Jamaica's road and road infrastructure. So we found that NAA generally adhere to the government's procurement guidelines related to the bidding, evaluation, and the award process. The report sets out our findings in relation to the cost incurred for the roads, and the findings have been condensed, Mr. Chairman, in the prompt that is before you. And that's all I would say at this point.
Thank you, Madam Auditor General. I don't know whether the PS first and then Mr. Hunter.
Thank you so much, Chair. We're actually happy to be here today to provide some further clarity to the Auditor General's report, and we thank her very much because we've worked very, very closely with her over the years. In terms of the assessment as to whether the NAA has adhered to the procurement guidelines, I'm very happy that the Auditor General agrees that there was general adherence to the procurement guidelines. We're also happy that we are here to provide clarity in terms of how we look at efficiency and economy and effectiveness in what the NAA has undertaken to do in terms of the roadworks. And I'm going to turn over now to Sir Hunter, because I have read the report, which is quite an extensive report. I've taken quite a long time to read and to process. And just to, from my overall reading of the report, I would have noted that we started off with roadworks, and then there were additional works that were undertaken that would have led to an increase in costs. So, Sir Hunter, I'm going to turn over to you for your remarks.
Thank you, PS. Good morning, Chairman and members. Good morning to the team from the Auditor General's Department, headed by Mrs. Pamela Monroe-Ellis, and the team from the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service. Chairman, members, we are grateful for this opportunity to expound on this report. In the interest of fairness, I'd like to note that the Auditor General's report has been tabled, was tabled 3-4 months ago, sufficient time for it to marinate, gestate, and for all who have read it to form their views and opinions regarding the report. Accordingly, Chairman, I'd like to make a few recommendations. The first one is that I think that at the time when the Auditor General's report is presented in Parliament, it should be accompanied by a written response from the entity at the same time. Simply because, based on fairness, just equity and fairness, our response should be in the public domain and have the same time for marination and gestation as the Auditor General's report. I would also...
Can I interrupt you? One of the issues, since you have raised it, one of the issues I intended to discuss with the committee in AOB is that the responses from MDAs, ministries, departments, and agencies, should not just be tabled, but should be made available to the public, whether through the Parliament's website or some other means, so that the public has a copy and can peruse your response. I mean, I have gone through your very detailed response, but this response is not currently, even though it's here, the public wouldn't have sight of it. So I'm going to come back to that as a committee to ensure that whenever an MDA responds wholesomely, it is made available to the public. Now, I do know that you have an opportunity during the audit process to respond, and that is generally included in the report, even though you wouldn't necessarily see the final report before it is sent to Parliament for tabling. But I know you have an opportunity during that process to give your perspective on what the Auditor General would have found.
Having given that perspective, it is entirely within the gift of the Auditor General whether that perspective is included in the final report.
Chair.
All right, I come in, member guy, which, in fairness, the Auditor General would have to verify that the response is either accurate, consistent, etc. And in most cases, the Auditor General provides an opinion on the response, right? Whether the response deals with a particular finding, whether it addresses the finding, whether it doesn't. So I'm not saying necessarily in this case, but certainly in the most of the reports that come before us, the response from the MDA is included and the Auditor General provides an opinion on that response. Let me allow Member Guy, just on this procedural matter.
Thank you very much, Chair. I sat and listened to Sir Hunter, as the permanent secretary called him, but my good friend. The EG. I was a little concerned, Chair, because for the years since 2002 I've been at this PAC, the matter of MDAs and their inclusion in the Auditor General's report, I have been told, and unless the practice has changed, that the draft report is sent to the agency and there is an opportunity for discussion where concerns are from the Auditor General, and the agency is given an opportunity to respond to those. And then if it is done satisfactorily, it is included in the report. Could I therefore ask the Auditor General if that has changed? And if that hasn't changed, why is it that we are where we are now?
Chair, are you hearing the Chair?
All right, Member Sibley's, you wanted to make a point on this particular matter?
Yes, Chair.
Okay,
Please.
go ahead.
Thank you. I concur with Mr. Hunter on the point that he raised. And in responding to your point, I also concur with him. And I am of the view that the response of the auditee ought to be tabled along with the Auditor General's report. Because, Chair, the point is, during the draft stage, it is that time that the auditee would have responded to the points raised. The Auditor General would then conclude the report. And then, upon concluding the report, her report is tabled, which is one of the reasons Mr. Hunter is making the point that the entity, the agency, the ministry, the department responds to the final report need to be given the same gravity in terms of time. And so I concur with Mr. Hunter on this point.
All right,
Thank you.
let me invite the Auditor General to respond.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. And a quick response is no, the process has not changed. I wish to add as well that the NAA would have been provided with a copy of the report that went to Parliament. Yes, so much so that I believe it would have been sent to NAA on the Monday, and the report was sent to Parliament on the Tuesday, but correct me if I'm wrong. But I wish to add that Mr. Hunter, having been provided with an opportunity to respond to the final report, actually outlined to us his concerns with an opinion that was stated in the report, and the report was pulled back, and the change made to reflect Mr. Hunter's concern, because we agreed with him that that comment would have been misleading. I want to say, too, in response to Mr. Hunter, well, we're speaking about the NAA's response, this comprehensive response. I think it's also important to put in context that this comprehensive response was submitted 3 months after the report was sent to Parliament. So our report could not have considered this. It's dated September 4th. There, however, Mr. Hunter would have responded to the draft. This is the draft report. The draft report, I would admit, was opinionated and formed an opinion on the actions of the ministry, of the NAA. All of that was removed from the report based on Mr. Hunter's concern. But I did realize from this response that apparently the draft report was being taken into consideration, because there's something that is mentioned in this response that is not in the final report. So I recognize that probably there is the view, there may be the view that the draft and the final is the same. And I say that, Mr. Chairman, because there's no, the opinion.
Whichever door, we can put on one of the something of them.
Hold on, somebody's online.
Yes.
Just mute your mics, please, if you're online.
Oh.
Please mute your mics if you're online. Thank you.
Yes. So I don't want the impression to be given that we did not take into consideration the NAA's response. In fact, I can, during the discussion, actually identify where the wording of the report was adjusted to reflect NAA's wording. Another point that I want to make is that this report, which unlike others, really doesn't give an opinion. The report removed all the opinions considering NAA's response. All it does is to report the facts. How the facts are interpreted, well, that is what we will discuss here this morning. But no opinion was made. We just reported the facts as it is. And since I am speaking at this point, I think I just want to add, Mr. Chairman, that there's a reason why we have different professions, because we view things differently. And it requires various professions really to have a robust review and form conclusions. So as an accountant, I'm going to think differently from Mr. Hunter as an engineer. We removed all the facts because I admit we're not engineers. So we can't comment on why NAA decided to do certain things. The aim of this report was simply, and that's what it reports, what was the original? We focused on 6 projects. What was the original intended provisional cost? When was it intended to be completed? What was the actual cost or the actual cost to date, and whether it was actually completed within time. And we stated that there was a savings, I think, of $68 million, and that may have been US as a result. Yes, EJ, I get into that. US, as a result of the negotiations with Czech right? However, we are going to have a difference on how probably other costs were treated. And we will disagree on that. I'm an accountant. And so I am not going to segment costs. And even if there are different projects, the fact is that I have to consider the cost to bring an asset into use. And we're talking about the same asset, and we're covering all the costs related to bringing that asset into use.
All right, before you respond, Mr. Hunter, I want to put something to the committee. Whenever a response comes from an MDA, as this response has come, I would like the Parliament to make the response available to the public once it's tabled here for discussion and put on the Parliament's website so that the public can have full viewing of it, whether it be NWA or any other MDA. So I'm asking the committee for the committee's concurrence with that recommendation.
Okay, so Mr. Chairman, with your...
Hold on, Mr. Hunter, not you.
Agreed, Sir Chair. I think it's just fitting that the public is aware of the response from the MD of any agency. It's a very brilliant point that Mr. Hunter alluded to a short while ago. And I think it's just fair that we make it public so the citizens of the country can see the response at the same time as when the report is tabled. Thanks.
All right, just for clarity, remember this would have been sent member Sibley's later. But once it is here and tabled, then it should be made up public. 1 second, member Sibley.
Thank you, Chair. I somewhat agree with the proposal. My only challenge, though, is that at the end of the deliberation of the PAC, there are certain things that are going to change in terms of how it is viewed, how it is assessed. Can we also, what's the methodology that we are going to ensure that the public have insight of both the AG's report, the response from the agency, and the deliberations here, separate and apart from PBCJ, that they have the third part of what is the third side of the truth then, for example. So that is the only concern I have, right?
And generally, we may not agree on everything, as the Auditor General has said. Where there are major points of disagreement, the committee usually seeks from either the agency or the Auditor General further probing of the issue with responses to come back to us so that we can satisfy ourselves. So when that arises, we would ask either the Auditor General or the agency or the ministry to come back to us with specific points. But as I said, I think we have agreed in the interest of equity, the responses should be made available to the public. Member Sibley's?
Chair, I agree in principle, but the methodology and the way how I think we need to have further discussion. And I, in agreement with Member Guy, as he rightfully put it, and that is why, while
you agreed when you were on the trip in Ghana.
And while there is merit in the principle, there is also, as Dr. Guy rightfully put it, there might be some risk. And I think we need to discuss the risk surrounding it, and then before we conclude on the matter. So I am suggesting that we have further discussion on it. But in principle, yes. But I think we should discuss the methodology and the risk, as Dr. Guy pointed out.
All right, well, what we can do, I had originally said we could take the matter in AOB when the NWA and the Auditor General's department has left us. So let's come back to this matter after we have concluded. Mr. Hunter.
Okay. Back to my script. First of all, Chairman, members, I think I should make the point that speaking for, as the Bible says, speaking for me and my house, we have tremendous respect for the Auditor General's department and the Auditor General herself. there's no angst amongst us. I mean, as professionals, we have professional differences, and we have robust discussion. Indeed, and in fact, Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to put on record that were I to work in any other department of government, it probably would be the Auditor General's department. I have, on many occasions...
You're not seeking a job?
I might have to, yeah. It might have to, yeah. I have, on many occasions over the years, been part of focus groups organized by the Auditor General to give feedback to the department in terms of how it may deliver a better product. So what I'm saying here is nothing outside of a professional dissertation. And one of the recommendations that I have here and that I've made over the years is that the Auditor General's department should examine the possibility of employing what I call technical auditors or specialist auditors to undertake specialist work whenever they are conducting certain types of audit. Because regardless of how good you are, every good thing can be made better. So that's one of the recommendations I have here.
1 second, I think the Auditor General just wants to respond to that.
I just want to say that I endorse that, and I can declare that we tried to do that for this audit. It's very difficult to get that kind of support, namely too in terms of from a remuneration standpoint, and that is the reason why this report, which I consider to be very basic, that's the reason why it does not provide any opinion or comments, because we did not have the technical support to do so.
Which then leads me to my next recommendation, and this recommendation has to do with peer review of the Auditor General's report should be a standard operating procedure. No matter how good a product is, it can be improved, meaning that I'm not suggesting that the Auditor General's department go and employ engineers and quantity surveyors or whatever, but they are professional bodies. There's the Jamaica Institution of Engineers, there's the accountants or whatever, what they're called? Yeah. You have all of these bodies that are, just based on my discussion with them, they would be prepared to give a view and an opinion on a particular audit. And I think it would be best for the process if that kind of scrutiny is incorporated in the process. I just have two other, well, one other comment I'd make, Chairman. The Auditor General's report carries a lot of weight. It is probably only second to biblical passages. And I say that because based on the Auditor General's report, if you examine the commentary in the press, interestingly, the first one was by Peter Espute, a man of the cloth. The second one was by Ronnie Thwaites, a man of the cloth. And I went to church, Boulevard Baptist, a couple weeks ago. My pastor, first time for the year, Devon Dick. Devon tackled me and said, E.G., you're falling off the rails. What is this I read in the Auditor General's report? So, you know, the Auditor General's report has ecclesiastic importance. And it is for those reasons why it is tremendously important that we get the facts right. I don't want to
urge you to now get to the...
I don't want to belabor the point of comment on the report. But, Chairman, I can table in evidence our letter of June 8, 2023, which was in response to our receipt of the final report. And here it is, was sent to the Auditor General's department. The response that I got from the Deputy Auditor General was that, listen, it is too late to edit the report, but we will attach an addendum. Yeah? That addendum was done and constitutes one line. One line. And it has to do with a statement in the original report commenting on the leaking pipes. And what the original report said, during the implementation of these projects, the this Chinese construction company from Beijing, discovered leaking pipes. And as a result, bam, bam, bam. Our contention was that, which is more probable, that a Chinese contractor from Beijing would come all the way to Jamaica and discover leaking pipes, and we here in Jamaica, and especially me, having spent 40 years at the NWC, would not know where leaking pipes are. And so the edit to the report, change it, and then the report now reads, during the execution of the project, leaking pipes were discovered. So they edited out that it was Czech who discovered it and merely said leaking pipes were discovered. Again, Chairman, most of the difference between the Auditor General's position and our position on the Mid-P project revolves around the inclusion of the water supply and sewage component to the project. Again, without going into a lot of gymnastics and details, the truth is that the government of Jamaica, in its wisdom or lack thereof, negotiated a sector loan, a road sector loan from China Exim Bank. And it was, and it is, as the Auditor General report also points out, this was a successor program to the JD program, which was also a road-only loan. When we started implementing the project, or formulating our strategy, it became clear to us that there's no point in the government undertaking redoing Hagley Park, Constant Spring, Marcus Garvey Drive as a Mandela, as a road-only project. And so efforts were made to incorporate water and sewage, as the case may be, into the project. Now, can
I just ask you, at what point in the process was that decision taken to include the water and the sewage?
So I table in evidence this document from the NWC dated November 5, 2015. And it is a comprehensive request made by the NWC to the OUR for funding to do these water projects, because that is the methodology by which water and sewage is implemented. There is what is called a K-factor dispensation. And so the NWC's first foray was to apply to the OUR for financing to incorporate this thing. Regrettably, they didn't get a positive response. And so on the 16th of October 31, 2016, the NWC and ourselves did a joint submission to Cabinet. We presented to Cabinet to say, dear Cabinet, there's no point in digging up Hagley Park Road, widening it, and you don't put in new water supply. And in fact, it's not just a matter of replacing leaking pipes, Chairman, members. There's no sewer main along Hagley Park Road. There was no sewer main along Constant Spring Road. These areas had no source, and as a consequence of which, people flush their toilet, it goes in the aquifer, pollutes the aquifer, leads to environmental degradation. So putting in central sewage is a good thing. So this was not a question of fixing leaking pipes. It was a question of incorporating in the road works modern infrastructure, water, sewage, drainage, and fiber optic cable to broaden the digital footprint. These were conscious recommendations that we made to the government of Jamaica, and to its credit, the government accepted.
Let me just clarification. But this would have been after the loan with China Exim Bank would have been negotiated, and the original scope would have already been finalized.
Right.
Yeah,
okay. Now, again, one may argue that the government ought not to have negotiated a road-only loan. I mean, But again, from practice, that's what's called a sector loan. Funding agencies will loan to the water sector, to the road sector, to the IT sector, and so on. So what it is that China Exim Bank, their prescription for their loan was that their money can only be used for ordinarily what is defined as road things. So base course, bridges, sidewalks, and so on. But it cannot be used for fiber optic, it cannot be used for sewage, it cannot be used for water. So the challenge that we had was in the wake of the government's good decision to fund these other elements, how do we massage the existing contracts to be able to absorb? Which is what we did. So the notion, and the section in the report, I'm still trying to make some sense of that section of the report, which, to my mind, the scholarship of that section of the report does not live up to the normal standard of the Auditor General. It's a bit muddled. Because as I said before, the excursion into water and sewage had nothing to do with discovery of leaking pipes. It was a conscious decision by the government of Jamaica on the recommendation of the technocrats to say, listen, you must incorporate. Indeed, and in fact, Chairman, I have letters here sent by the NWA to the NWC when I was president at NWC years ago, saying, we're going to expand Washington Boulevard and Dunrobin, please come and change out your leaking pipes. So knowledge that a lot of the pipes in the urban center need to be replaced has always been there. The question was always, how do you finance it? And how do you finance it on a schedule to match the roadworks? And we've tried the NWC to do it themselves. Eventually, we gave up, went to Cabinet, Cabinet agreed, Cabinet voted the money.
All right, hold 1 second. The Auditor General wants to respond.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to address the point because Mr. Hunter is giving the impression that the report contains errors, and that's not so. As it pertains to the discovered leaking water, that's actually not our language. I will direct you to the Ministry of Finance's monitoring report dated October 2016 to March 2016, the Major Infrastructure Development Program. And for that area, we took it from that report. During the conveyance of the works, check, main contractor in bracket, discovered leaking water distribution main pipelines along the work section, and the NWC were subsequently contacted. That is from the Ministry of Finance report.
Except though that, Mr. Chairman, except though that even if it is so.
Yes, but even if it is so, Mr. Hunter, you have not provided anything substantive. You know, you wrote to us and we accepted it. But there is no evidence otherwise to support what you're saying besides what is written in paper. So I think you're being disingenuous to support that, to suggest that the report is not factual. Or the audit report and the evidence, and Mr. Hunter should know that, though he's not an accountant, that the strongest evidence for an auditor is third-party information. So the Ministry of Finance's evidence would be stronger than the representation made by NWA. But Mr. Hunter made that representation in a letter. He did not provide anything else to substantiate what he was saying. But when we considered what he was saying, and at that point in time, I said, let us err on the side of caution and give the NWA the benefit. And we removed it. Mr. Hunter is now discussing something that is not in the report. It's not in the report. This history that you have given is not in the report. So if you did not bring it up, the members here would not be aware of it. And the people would not, the people of Jamaica would not be aware of it. So you're not being reasonable, Mr. Hunter. After it is that here it is. The evidence that I have before me is stronger than what you sent in a letter. And I decided to err on the side of caution. Again, Mr. Chairman, because Mr. Hunter made a recommendation about getting technical review and peer review. The Auditor General's report is not a technical review. We kept it basic. It is just reporting the facts. This is what it was supposed to cost. As a result, and I did not use over expenditure. I didn't use that term. I used additional expenditure. And I said that because it is my view that this expenditure was indeed necessary. It's just that it was not included in the original contract. So the cost increased as a result. I did not say it wasn't justified. I did not say it was poor planning. I am just reporting what the actual cost is. I made no comment in terms of efficiency and effectiveness in this report. It is just reporting the cost. And Mr. Hunter is coming from the head of the entity, and I understand that. But remember, there's a reason why the Auditor General's Department is an independent institution. And if we start amending the report to suit heads of agency, then immediately our objectiveness would be compromised and our independence. We have to report the information as it is. I cannot take into consideration perception, and I have to take into consideration the reality. And though it is that we seek to write a report that is not inflammatory and use language that is inflammatory, Mr. Chairman, I have no control over how it is reported. I have no control over how it is reported by other entities and how it is that it is perceived. But what is important is that the facts are in here, and the evidence is here, and I'm repeating, Mr. Chairman, that the language used in here is what we saw in the evidence. We didn't create the language. It is what the NWA, and I have that, this is what Mr. Hunter sent, and what is here is in red, is what Mr. Hunter wrote, NWA, and this is included in the report. So I think it is disingenuous to take this approach, Mr. Hunter, because the report, in fact, did not criticize the NWA, but just reporting the facts. And it is giving the impression that the Auditor General or the Auditor General's Department is withholding information or just putting the information out there. Because Mr. Hunter has not even mentioned the fact that we, in the first finding, speaks about the strides made by the NWA over the years in terms of addressing the weaknesses that we had identified before. So I said to Mr. Hunter that I will go as far as he takes me. This report was not intended to criticize NWA, but in fact, just to show the facts. And we will disagree as an engineer and as an accountant. I can't chop it up and just report a part of the cost. As an accountant, I am going to reflect the full cost. Whether it is 10 contracts or 2 or 1, it's just the full cost. I did not say it wasn't necessary. I am reporting the cost.
Okay, so Mr. Chairman, I was hoping that I would not get a reflexive defense because that is not going to get us anywhere.
And I don't want us to spend the little time we have going back and forth. I want us to deal with the substantive matter.
Suffice it to say, Chairman, that if indeed the Minister of Finance got it wrong, there's no need for the Auditor General to get it wrong as well. The Auditor General's Department spent 2 years with us on this audit. Anything and everything that the Auditor General's Department wanted to find out about what the NWA does, it doesn't have to rely on what Minister of Finance say. The horse's mouth is where you get that
Mr.
from.
Hunter,
But anyway,
let's
not get into that.
No, hold on now. The Auditor General has said what you have said is not in the final report. Not in the final report.
Unless the final report is different from the one that we got from the Auditor General's Department. And I don't know that is so. But we spent a lot of time going through the report that we got. And anything and everything that I'm saying is called from that copy. Let me be magnanimous and admit that perhaps by some misfortune, the copy that we got as the final report from the Auditor General's Department is different from what they have. I'll be magnanimous. Suffice it to say that what we got. The critique that I'm giving is a fair and balanced critique based on what we got, okay? So let me expound as well on one of the reasons why the issue of the water and the sewage is important, Chairman. Because what I would have expected from the Auditor General's report is a perspective that said, well, okay, yes, you guys started out with a road only, you expanded the scope, and as a result of expanding the scope, there's additional costs. Now, the government's guideline for overrun, and the Auditor General makes heavy weather of the fact that they never use the word overrun. But when you look at the report, here's the title of the paragraph: Time overrun, increased costs, which is a slick journalistic way of inducing the reader to make a connection in there. So,
Mr. Hunter, don't go there. Just
okay.
Stay with the facts, please.
I withdraw.
Just give your perspective, but don't go into trying to assume what people believe. Okay?
Okay. I withdraw. So Chairman, I have here with me, this is a document from NEPA. And what it does, it speaks to the allowable density in areas that benefit from a public sewer system. Okay? So, in addition to being a significant environmental intervention when public sewers are put in, it is also, it represents significant capital gain for the owner of land. Indeed, and in fact, if you own land on Hagle Park Road, and prior to the sewer system being put in, you would have been able to build 10 townhouses on that acre of land. After the sewer system is put in, depending on other planning considerations, you can even get up to 100 habitable units per acre. So the point of our decision to incorporate water and sewage was A, as an environmental intervention, and secondly, for land to be able to, and development, to be able to appreciate and enjoy the full benefit of it. So these are strategic decisions that, thankfully, as I said before, the government of Jamaica has now accepted that model. So going forward, any road works that the government is doing will be done in that way. Should it have been done when the loan was negotiated? That's conjecture. But the fact is that when we had the opportunity to change, we did change. It's called agile planning. The other point that the report sets out, it says there was an overrun on Mandela, or increased cost on Mandela. And Chairman, the importance of what I'm saying is the fact that when you work for government, people think that you're either corrupt or incompetent, or worse, both. And to say that the cost on Mandela moved from 10 to 50 without more, you know, can portend significant peril to our professional career as well as our livelihood. I could be someplace buying crab in a circle and some misfortune visits me. Yes. So here's the thing, Chairman. The Mandela design was from 6 Mile to the Highway 2000 ramp. That's Mandela Phase 1. And from 6 Mile, and from the Highway 2000 ramp to Jose Marti, Mandela Phase 2. That was our construct. We took it to Cabinet. Cabinet approved Mandela Phase 1, which is from 6 miles to the Highway 2000 ramp. Cabinet did not approve Mandela Phase 2. So what we end up having, Chairman, is an improved road from 6 miles to the Highway 2000 ramp. On a tour conducted by our minister when we visited the site, and in the wake of Cabinet not approving Mandela Phase 2, we were instructed by the owner, the ministry, to extend the paving work from the Highway 2000 ramp to the Portmore turnoff, for obvious reasons, because that was included in Mandela Phase 2, but was not approved, so we extended. The second thing is this. Because we incorporated the water line as a part of the project, the water line did not stop at 6 Mile, at the flyover. It actually stopped at the Duane Park intersection. That's where you connect into a new main going up. So, the fact that we had to extend the water line from 6 Mile up to Duane Park meant that we also had to do road works because you would have excavated to lay the new pipes. So the increase in Mandela, again, to just recite what that increase is without speaking to the scope on the raison d'etre for this increase does not give the true picture. And our contention was that without saying why this cost was increased, did not do justice to our efforts. The government procurement guidelines clearly says an overrun is when you go to buy a dozen eggs for $10 and you end up with a dozen eggs for $12. However, where you get 14 eggs for $12 or $13, that's not an overrun.
Let me just ask for clarity. What you're outlining, I assume you would have indicated in your response to the
It's
auditor.
all in the report, yeah. It's all.
And I'm assuming, well, I'm going to ask the Auditor General, was that reflected as outlined by Mr. Hunter in the report that you presented as your final report?
And to be fair to the Auditor General, she didn't say, and she said she didn't use...
Hold on.
Let me read what is in the report, Mr. Chairman. Paragraph 3, 1.2. NWA undertook additional roadworks amounting to US $4.05 million through extension of the roadway from 6 miles to Dehaney Park, as well as alignment of road connections in the ferry area, Tom Kringle Road, and expansion of the Portmore entrance. NWA originally contracted the scope of works for the realignment from 6 miles to Caymanos Toll Road entrance at a cost of $63.9 million in July 2016. NWA advised that the additional paving works from Dehaney Drive to 6 miles was necessary due to damaged and leaking pipelines, while the Portmore crossing required overlay works. That's it in summary. All that Mr. Hunter has said, this is it in summary here.
Except though,
I didn't say anything about
Chairman,
the
except though,
overruns.
members, I put it to you. The audit has the audit at a glance, yeah? Which is what most people read. And when you look at the substance, I mean, we have no issue with the facts, you know, but when you look at the substance of what's in the report and the audit at a glance, which is what, cursory examination, there's no nexus, okay? So for example, Chairman, the NWA and the Ministry of Finance and the parent ministry set up a negotiating apparatus that was able to save the government $69 million on these projects. It is stated in the Auditor General's report on page, 54. It is not in the audit at a glance. It is not in the audit at a glance. Now, I put it to you as reasonable persons. An entity of the government of Jamaica, where we are supposed to be incompetent and corrupt, we engage...
Don't use those terms.
I take back that characterization. We engage a Fortune 500 construction company in negotiation, and the empirical evidence is that we saved the government of Jamaica $69 million. Yeah? That is in the report, page 54.
Mr. Hunter.
It's small
Mr.
print.
Hunter.
It's not in the. It's not.
I know you're saying it's not in the summary.
And it is not in the audit at a glance.
But it's in the, Mr. Hunter, I understand how you feel when the media reports certain things, right? No, I know, but I'm saying the Auditor General has captured what you just outlined. I remember reading it.
Yeah.
It is there in the summary, right? So it's not fair to say that it was not captured. I know you probably wanted it to have more prominence, but I know I saw it and I read it.
Okay, so Mr. Chairman,
right?
the final thing I'll say, and to be fair to the Auditor General's department, as I always am, they never said there was any cost overrun. In my discussions with my good friend Mr. Hare several times, I said, Christopher, you know, if you put this thing in this way, this is what the press is going to jump on. And again, I got the disclaimer, oh, we can't be held responsible for what the press highlights, even though the probability of that being the headline was palpable. But I digress. I digress.
I mean, the Auditor General wants to respond.
Mr. Chairman, page 5, audit at a glance. The first point is key data. NAA received and spent $27.41 billion to maintain its portfolio of main roads for financial years 2016-17 to 2021. The second point, contract negotiations resulted in a reduction of $68.93 million, or 27% on proposed sums for implementation of the 6 MIDP projects. It is there.
Is there, Mr. Hunter?
Except though, Chairman, to say that there's a reduction in the price could be at the gift of the contractor. Czech could have decided, you know, let me be nice to this country and let me reduce my prices by 69 million. The truth about it, Chairman, and the Auditor General Department knows this very well. In their JDIP audit, they recommended that the NAA should negotiate prices with Czech. We took it 10 steps further. Not only, we said, no, I don't want the NAA to do the audit itself because maybe I am tempted and I can drive a Benz at the end of the process. So we set up a multidisciplinary negotiating team, representative from the Ministry of Finance, representative from the parent ministry, and a representative from the NAA with a lawyer to watch the proceeding and take records. We also built in it, it's called the governance framework. That committee could not bind the government of Jamaica because next thing I see everybody driving Benz. What they were supposed to do, and which they did, was to do their negotiation and come to me with a recommendation, or BMW, come to me with a recommendation. I can't bind the government either because I might be tempted to drive a Benz.
I wish you would stop using that. Don't, in this day and age, it's not helpful. Don't do it.
I would. Okay. I can't bind the government of Jamaica. What I do is I make a recommendation to the permanent secretary. The permanent secretary then can't bind the government. The permanent secretary then goes to cabinet with the recommendation. And it is the cabinet that decides the value of each contract. So the point I'm trying to make is this, Chairman. Not only did we pay countenance to the Auditor General's recommendation about negotiating, we enhanced the process. And indeed and in fact, that model is now being used by other parts of government to do negotiation. So the 69, I wanted it, I'm not looking for a pat on the back, Chairman, because quite often a pat on the back has a knife in it. So what I want the records to show is that as a result of the negotiating machinery that was developed, the negotiating team succeeded in getting a $69 million for the government and people of Jamaica. This reduction was not through Czech's benevolence, as can be concluded from the language of the report.
I wouldn't say the language concludes that. And Mr. Hunter, I just, again, in fairness, it is upfront, is the second item on page 5, audit at a glance. It recognizes that saving. So I think the Auditor General captured it. Yes.
To even go further, And I was wondering, because I read the report, and if you look at page 9, NWA's records detailed negotiation of contracted price between the main contractor and MEGJC and MidP. For instance, we noted that the GOJ's negotiations, and that negotiations was a team comprising NWA, Ministry of Finance and Public Service, Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation, and MTM, with the China Harbour Engineering Company, enabled a 68.93 million or 27% reduction on initial proposed contracted sum. This is in the executive summary. So the second page, first into second. So even if they, at a glance, it might have suggested that it was the benevolence of check that caused the reduction, this particular part of it, aside from it being mentioned at page 54, right, as Mr. Hunter is suggesting, is clearly up in the frontier. But there's another reason why I asked a question. Mr. Hunter.
Yes, sir.
You said that the road work involved other areas as well, such as pipe laying and fiber optics and drainage and sewage. Mandela, did Mandela involve any water main along the highway?
Yes, sir.
Replacement?
Yes.
All right.
Except though, clarification, the Mandela pipeline does not run in the verge of the road.
Mm-hmm. Doesn't?
No, it doesn't. It's over in the side, yeah.
That is the one that was replaced?
Yes.
Or
yes.
Replaced?
Yes.
All right. Some time ago, subsequent to the completion of Mandela, there was a failure of one of the pipes by the National Water Commission. And it was suggested that the footing of one of the overhead pass near to Ferry was what was responsible for this failure. And it had to, it caused the National Water Commission, apart from Kingston being out of water for many days, significant expenses to reroute that pipe. Now, if this was part of the arrangements that were done, part of the contract, was there any liability on the part of the contractor?
Okay. So, Dr. Guy, if you recall, that failure occurred during the construction. It occurred during the construction, and it was repaired by the contractor in the course of doing that work. The failure occurred on the ramp of the overhead bridge, yeah. And it occurred during the construction, yeah.
I want to...
Chair,
Member Sibley's? Okay, go ahead.
Been up for a little while.
If it was the same hand from before, okay.
No, Chair. Chair, a question to Mr. Hunter. Mr. Hunter, on page 23 of your report, responses to the Auditor General's report, the last paragraph that starts, the agency acknowledges the valuable lessons that can be gleaned from the audit. Nevertheless, it holds a different viewpoint regarding certain fundamental assumptions in the report. The agency firmly emphasized that infrastructure projects inherently involve uncertainties, and while delays and cost adjustments are undesirable consequences, they do not always result from inadequate project management. I pause there to ask. I recognize that you never reference the point that you were responding to the Auditor General report as it relates to not always result from inadequate project management. Can you assist us in this point? Why would you respond in this way? Is it that the Auditor General in a report mentioned that it's inadequate project management, and if it is so, if it's so, can you expound on your response, please?
Okay, so thanks for that question, Member Sibbs. One of the overall theses of the Auditor General's report is that while it gives us, one or two crumbs of kudos, it then takes them away quite rapidly with overarching statements. If you look at the recommendation, the report, it speaks to the need for whole of government and some nebulous characterization of how all of government should get together, perhaps sing kumbaya and get a project implemented. I respectfully disagree with that thesis for the following reasons. One, if you look at the elements of the Mid-P project, it had JPSCO, even though only 20% the government owns, but part of the government. JPSCO had to relocate its infrastructure for us to widen the road. Lime and Digicel had to relocate their infrastructure to allow us to work. The NWC had to design the water and the sewage thing and give us information for us to incorporate. The National Land Agency was responsible for the acquisition of property. There was a scheduled utility meeting every 2 weeks with notes and minutes from those meetings made available to the Auditor General Department, where all of these issues were discussed and decisions made as the project proceeds. So the notion that all of government and all of government approach could have yielded a better product, the evidence does not support that notion. And I struggled to try and understand what was meant by all of government approach. And the only thing I could come up with, Chairman, on Mid-P, one of the enduring challenges we had was to get the Consent Spring market. It took us about 3 years. And I wondered if the notion was that, well, government should have given us the market at a, earlier date, which is somewhat similar to the issue out in Bull Bay and the police station. It took us a while to get that from government. But again, you see, Chairman, members, governments rarely have single objective. It is not the government is government just to build a road. The government is in government to govern a country, and there are conflicting things. It wants the market, but you have the people going through on the road. It wants the police station, but you're concerned about the security thing. And one has to balance and optimize. So I don't want, the notion that all of government should coalesce around a single endeavor, which is to build a road, to my mind, misses the point.
All right. I'm just going to ask the Auditor General to respond, and then Member Cousins has been holding. No, just turn off your mic first, and let me allow.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Chairman. In response to the question asked regarding NAA's response provided on page 24 it's NAA's response, right? And Mr. Hunter suggesting that we indicated that there was inadequate project management. There's nowhere in our report. And it also speaks about certain foundational assumptions in the report. And that is why I said at the beginning that this response is a response to the draft. It's not to the final report, because there's nothing in this report that speaks about...
On a point of order.
Chair. The planning.
Hold 1 second.
Yes.
What's the point of order, Member Sibley?
Chair, it seems to me, this is the second time the Auditor General is pointing out that there might be the response from the from the agency, NWA, might be that of the draft report. Can we as a committee really be comforted by the discussion here then if it is not, if we are not sure if what is being discussed is apple and apple?
All right, I take the concern. I mean, I would like, we can't do it here, but I would like after the meeting for you to provide to us what was sent to NWA in terms of that report, because Mr. You're saying the responses are to a draft report, which Mr. Hunter is saying that's the report he got as final.
Might I add, Mr. Chairman, that I do believe that after the report is tabled, the clerk to the House generally sends a copy of the report to the entity and requests a response. So, whereas I know that we provided the report as well, I am generally copied on that communication.
Chair, Chair, might I respectfully ask that we at least adjourn for even 5 minutes to sort this out? Because this is important that this be resolved.
I don't know if we need to adjourn. I mean, all right, what I know as the fact, the clerk has shown me the final report, which was tabled, was sent to NWA, and she has shown me that. So even if there was some misunderstanding or let me just say misunderstanding between a draft and a final, whatever was tabled was sent to NWA. So we know that as a fact. So in terms of what you responded to, Mr. Hunter, the Auditor General is saying what you have responded to is not in the final report.
Okay, again, Chairman, the fault may entirely be my own, but I will read from the document I have here. Opportunities to improve, this is page 15, and it reads as follows. Going forward, MECJC and NWA should adopt a whole-of-government approach for the implementation of major road projects. In this regard, the strengthening of collaborative efforts with other executing agencies, such as the National Water Commission and other major utilities, to plan and implement high-risk road projects can improve awareness of the major project risks and improve timely completion, thereby improving achievement and value for money. Further, both entities should take steps at the pre-contract stages of the project implementation to ensure that design considers all prerequisites, infrastructure needs, and terrain to minimize modification during the implementation stage. This could better inform budgetary requirements. And this is the conclusion of the thing. So,
yeah. Okay, I don't see, member siblings, I don't see the need for us to adjourn on this. What is in the report, the final report was sent to NWA. NWA has responded. Some specific things the Auditor General has said were not in the final report. I think there are interpretations of what language was used and a response was. But I think we can proceed. Let me invite Member Cousins, who has been holding for a while.
So thank you, Chairman. I too have looked and examined carefully the report from the AG, and I've examined the response from the National Works Agency. So, Sir Hunter, the first point question I want to ask is that, are you saying that there's more an inadequacy in the planning process as opposed to an inadequacy in the supervision? Because that is what I'm picking up from what your response has been and what the AG has presented, that there was an inadequacy in the planning. Because why I say this, you have more of variations as opposed to overruns. Because we're taking issue with the use of the word overrun, but it is really variations. to the contract as opposed to overruns. So let us be clear there. And so a variation is not an overrun. So with the exception of the junction road, what I've picked up is a pattern where water and sewer contributes to the major variations.
Yeah, absolutely.
For all three, the commonality is land acquisition. I'll get to that. Because there's a major issue there. What role did the National Water Commission play in the initial stages of the discussions around these projects? And I ask the question because, interestingly and ironically, you were in charge of the National Water Commission at some point. And the issues as it relates to roads and the construction of roads, and all MPs can speak to it. Many times we fix a road, we turn it back, NWC come and dig it up. So the common complaint has always been that the NWC and the NWA, right, don't seem to be communicating. But in recent times, since you took over the NWA, there was a memorandum. I am aware of an MOU between yourself and the NWC as it relates to them patching roads or repairing roads that they would have disrupted.
May I answer your question?
So you can answer a lot of questions. You can answer the first set of questions and I'll get to the other.
Let me answer your question, Mr. Cousins. The advent of NWA fixing a road and NWC going back to dig it up is legendary. Yeah. And I always say to people, are you suggesting that in the morning when the NWC people go into work, they put on their clothes and they stretch and they say, well, which road should I go and dig up today? No, it doesn't quite work that way. There is a rational, there is a logical, causative reason why it happens. And Mr. Cousins, it happens because most of the water infrastructure underground is old and fragile. For example,
happy for that response. I'm happy for that response. Because accepting what you just said, there would be no need for us to have these variations. If you were to follow what you're saying logically, when we are planning, we know of these old and deteriorate. You see, my problem, you know.
Mr. Cousin,
hold on, let me finish, man.
You allow me to answer your question, sir?
Hold on, just ask the question, then you can answer, Mr. Hunt.
Yeah, with all due respect. Yeah? Your answer to my question, and my concern here, you know, is how do we ensure that the Jamaican people get value for money? If we have these inadequacies in planning, knowing what the issues are, is it that we go into this thing knowing what the issues are, but planning for the variation and costing and leading to additional cost to the Jamaican people without a procurement system in place? That is dangerous, you know.
Okay. So Mr. Cousin, I understand that when I addressed this matter previously, you weren't here, so let me repeat. So Mr. Cousin, it is well known that a lot of the infrastructure is old and dated. So for example, the water main that was on Constant Spring Road was 89 years old. It's an old cast iron pipe with lead joints. Now, we all know the Dr. Guy over there, from a medical point of view, knows the implication of lead in water supply. So it's a problem. So one of the things that usually happens, Mr. Cousins, is that because of fragmented planning, yes, and fragmented implementation over the years, the road authority usually go and deal with road without reference to anything else. The water utility usually goes and does its thing without reference to anything else. So the manifestation, Mr. Cousins, of overlaying a road that has fragile pipes underneath it is that the pipes, the equipment will stress the ground. That stress is translated to the pipe material and it will break. If the break manifests during the construction, it's easy because you can fix it then. Generally though, it manifests sometime afterwards. And so you need to go back and excavate. So Mr. Cousins, may I answer your question? So to answer your question, when we got to the planning stage, Mr. Cousins, we said to the government, you need to replace the pipes simultaneously with the road construction. Here, Mr. Cousins, is the document from the NWC that speaks to, scopes out the entirety of the water and sewage works that would be required, the costing of it, and their application to the OUR for funding. They did not get a favorable response from the OUR to this submission, as a result of which the NWC made this presentation to Cabinet, October 31, 2016. Cabinet then took the decision to fund the water and sewage component in tandem with the roadworks. That formula was adopted for the South Coast Road as well. And Mr. Chairman, you can bear evidence that in our presentation to you as Member of Parliament for your constituency, for the Lady Musgrave Road, we presented to you a full infrastructure project. Can you recall that presentation?
You want to then update us as to when the project is going to start and where we are? I don't know why you opened that door, because if you open that door, I will ask.
I just want you to confirm.
Okay.
I just want you to confirm, first of all, that in all the projects that we're doing now, particularly your Lady Musgrave Road area, it is an all infrastructure design, Mr. Cousin. Yeah. Have I answered your question, sir?
You are preaching to the converted as it relates to the processes involved in the construction process.
Yes, sir.
I am very familiar and au fait with all of that. The point I was making was a general point as it relates to the planning process, because I'm saying, remember, my starting point was a deficiency. I'm saying that, are you agreeing with me that was a deficiency?
We have improved now.
In terms of procurement.
Yes, sir.
What were the implications, Was it a fair process in terms of selecting whomever would have gotten the additional funds? Could it have been where we put that to procurement to get the best value for money? Or we had to do the variation?
Coming to that.
All right.
May I answer you, Mr.
Yes, you can, because I have,
Okay, so the government of Jamaica has 3 options for procurement. One, in accordance with the Public Procurement Act, you have a competitive process and contractors are selected and contracts are executed. So that's scenario 1. Scenario 2 is where the government declares a project to be a national project, and so it is not under the ambit of the Public Procurement Act. It comes to Parliament. So that's option 2. Option 3 is where the project is a bilateral, multilateral project. It doesn't come under the stipulations of the Public Procurement Act, and the government treats with whomever it is dealing with, is contracting with, within the ambit of that financing agreement. The Mid-P project and the South Coast project are both bilateral undertaken between the government of Jamaica and government of China. And one of the conditions of the financing agreement, as the representative from Minister of Finance will tell you, one of the stipulations is that the sole beneficiary of this concessionary agreement shall be a Chinese contractor. That's written in the financing agreement. So we had no option, or the government had no, there was no intention to tender, but we were to negotiate. And as I spoke before, the negotiating machinery was set up and it is that negotiating machinery that yielded the various contracts.
All right. So, and I've noted as well that there were additional, there was an additional cost to the taxpayers of Jamaica for delays. But I'm wondering as well if there, within this very contract that you had with China Harbour or the Chinese company, there wasn't a liquidated damages clause. Because, for example, where the delays as a result of their actions, we ought to have benefited. I've noted here that.
Mr. Cousins, could you point me to the section in the report that identifies delays and the consequential costs to whomever?
It would be your response, you know. I'm talking about your response. I can go to the specific section of the response that deals with it.
That would be very helpful.
Yeah, I will do that. Also.
Okay. So, Mr. Cousins, just to clarify, you're an attorney, so you know this very well. In a contract has to be balanced between the two parties. So what the contract specifies is that if there is a delay in the execution of the works as a result of any fault of the owner, the contractor is entitled to be compensated. And to balance the scales, if the contractor delays the execution of the work to the detriment of the owner, the contractor compensates the owner. However, these are not notional. You have to prove it. You can't just say, well, the work was delayed for 2 days. It's $10. So you have to prove it.
Page 27 of your response.
Yes. Read it, let me hear.
Prolongation.
Yeah, prolongation. In
Same
respect
thing.
of the Junction Road contract.
Same thing.
No, in relation to the Junction Road contract. Yeah,
so I was referring to the prolongation
yeah.
and the additional cost as a result of the
yes,
prolongation.
and we admit that. That's not in dispute.
I think the final...
But that's not China Harbour. That was a local contractor.
Yeah, in terms of land acquisition.
Yes, sir.
Because what I appreciate is that you came with recommendations that I, too, agree with. In terms of the specialized auditor who is aware of the collaboration with the professional arms of the engineering and architect. You understand? But the question now is land acquisition.
Yes, sir.
It's important.
Yes, sir.
Because I've certainly experienced it in my constituency where the highway is concerned and the issues around it. I didn't get any recommendation from you, but is it that you're suggesting that maybe as a parliament we need to review that Compulsory Land Acquisition Act to take into account our experiences thus far to better improve, because what we're here for is to strengthen the systems in place to improve whatever offerings there are.
Mr. Cousin, allow me to regard you as a genius, because I have here with me one of the comments I made about the Auditor General report. The Auditor General merely says, well, you know, the NWA was supposed to deliver 50 parcels of land, and at count, they only delivered X, and that was it. Notwithstanding the fact that it is the NLA that delivers the land, that is one. And what I thought would have been more useful, and in fact, in my writing here, it's a more useful position of the Auditor General would have been a critique of the Land Acquisition Act and to make recommendations for its improvement. It is a 1947 piece of legislation, the Land Acquisition Act. And the way we're acquiring land now is what we're acquiring in 1947. And to my mind, there has to be an improvement. We can do better. So what I have here, Mr. Cousins, is a 4-point critique of the Land Acquisition Act. And I have been discussing in other parts of government that this is something that needs to be taken by the scruff of its neck, re-examined, and redone to fit modern times. Yes. So we are addendum on that. We are at one on that, Mr. Cousins.
Member, hold on, Member Cousins. I have 2 members who haven't spoken yet, and I give you a long run. So let me just allow. No, man, let me just allow the members who haven't had a chance to even make a point yet. So let me allow Member Clark and then Member Wilson, all right? Just release your mic, okay?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. You notice how well the mic system is working.
As Deputy Speaker, I'm sure you're aware, and you're about to chair a committee as well.
Mr. Chairman, with all due respect, all those who are sitting on this side, we are all colleagues, and we make up a committee. It is unfair that you would give me or any other of my colleagues a chance to ask 8 questions on a trot and don't take into consideration the rest. They are all important questions. They are all important questions, but allow us to take part in, Mr. Chairman, I am using my time. We are here, and if I don't have a question, I will sit and I will listen.
You have a question?
And the minute that I have a question, I have been asking for some time, long time now. And I'm giving the chairman a friendly advice because a quorum is what is needed at all times for a committee to be completed. Right? Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
I've given you the opportunity. I've given you the opportunity.
I know. But I'm being harassed by the gentleman who asked 8 questions, and I didn't say anything.
Just go ahead, Member Clark, just go ahead and ask the question.
Mr. Chairman, I will have to speak on this matter at all times, and I'm not one to give trouble. But if trouble comes, then we must deal with it. Yes, you are.
Member Cousins, please. Member Cousins, just allow Member Clark to ask his question.
Mr. Chairman,
yes, go ahead.
One of the things that we as members of Parliament must understand, and also the general public, is that as there's an old saying, if it don't broke, don't fix it. And so often, many a times, we are rehabilitating roads, not creating new roads, but rehabilitating roads. And for the life of us, we tend to put the utilities in the middle of the road. And so anytime that you're going to disturb the road for whatever reason, it puts pressure on the utilities. And so we have been talking different circles that we need to put to the side of the road so that we're not actually doing the road, you don't disturb. But for what it is in the middle of the road. And so the practice has always been, Mr. Hunter, is that once a water pipe under the road don't show any sign, then they're not going to dig it up. But when you put a 10-ton or a 20-ton roller or a compactor on the roadway to compact the road to give us that nice velveted-looking Barber green, it's going to do some things underneath. And so a month down the road, we start to see water coming up. Are we going to leave it? We have to dig it up. One of the things, Mr. Chairman, that I would love for NWA and NWC to address is the fact that when it happens, and we, John Public, or the political representative, will call in, because we do it from time to time. Do it quickly, repair it quickly, so that people don't see 6 months down the road and the water still running on the road, or the part where you dig up still left unfixed. And so it will give us in the mind of John Public, say, oh, they are actually responding to the situation. So that is what we need to take into consideration. But also, going forward, building new roads, which we are doing, is that we don't do the same, we don't practice the same thing of putting the utilities in the middle of the road. Let us find some way of putting it into the side of the road.
So, Mr. Clark, could I just answer that, because that's a technical matter. So what we did on the Mid-P, for example, water lines are put on the side, and it's a little more costly, but we put parallel, so one pipe on that side to serve those premises, a pipe on the other side to serve those premises. That's the better way to do it. The sewage, however, is what is in the middle of the road. And what it is from a public health point of view, there has to be virgin earth between a water main and a sewer main. So that if there's a break in the water main, okay, so when a water main is in action, the pressure inside the water pipe is higher than the pressure outside the water pipe. When there's a break, the pressure decreases and it sucks in anything that is around it. So you have to have virgin soil between a water pipe and a sewer pipe just in case there's a leak on the sewer pipe. So these are engineering considerations. The alternative is to do what they call a utility corridor, where you encase it in concrete and so on and so on. The construction is a little more complex. But the point is taken, that to the extent that the utilities can be isolated from the normal run is a good thing. And it's something that we're always looking at. But there is an engineering public health reason, and Dr. Guy should be nodding behind you to agree with my position.
Member Wilson.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. And first, I want to start by endorsing what Member Clark said earlier, that we should be given fair opportunity in this committee to express our views and ask our question and let our voice be heard as it pertains to going through the Auditor General report. I would want to reiterate that we are all here serving our constituents, and no one member should be able to have the committee and asking questions for any extended period of time.
And I will respond to that. And I think you have been here long enough to know that there have been fair opportunity offered
Chair,
to
if that was the
every
consensus,
member.
if that was the consensus,
No,
we would not be, we would have
no,
not.
I am saying there have been
Member
members,
Clark wouldn't have
there have been members who have been given fair opportunities.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Chair, it is something that we have to
and
look at
Member
how
Wilson, you have made a point, and I am entitled to respond.
Sure.
You, as a member, other members have gotten extensive opportunities to ask questions. Extensive. No, hold on. Member Cousins, please, please. Right?
Thank you for the protection,
hold on. Extensive. I don't think there's any member here who can fairly say that they seek to ask questions and they're cut off by this chairman. No, and hold on. Don't engage in the crosstalk. So I'm saying to you, Member Wilson, there have been occasions with you and other members where you have been given a long run to ask questions and I don't interrupt. So one member had multiple questions. He asked them. I am now coming to other members because I'm giving every member an opportunity to ask their questions. We started late, half an hour late, and I'm giving you the opportunity.
Yeah, and that is why, Chair, being that we have started late, that you would have been a bit more prudent in how you manage the operations of this committee, and don't give one member, 8, 9 questions.
Well, you can ask your question, sir.
Yes, Chair. So, Mr. Hunter, thank you for your presentation this morning. It has been quite informative as a new member of Parliament. And what I would want to mention is that in looking specifically at how the NAA is operating, it is a clear direction and directive of our Prime Minister, and I think it's important for us to have it on record, that it is our Most Honorable Andrew Holness who stood in this very same Parliament and declared that when they are constructing roads, we should put in the requisite infrastructure. And that is a direction that the government has taken on, and we as members of the Parliament would want to comment and subscribe to. And it's not something that has been seen in Jamaica since we have gained independence. And going forward, and it's good that Member Cousins had brought up a point, it's going forward, we would see that this formula and direction will yield tremendous benefit for Jamaica. I've seen where in Westmoreland Western, in particular in Negril, we were doing a road repair there. And as soon as the compactor hit the road, all the pipes underground started to break. And it caused tremendous delays in the work project. It's something that was not foreseen because it was a relatively new pipes that were underground. But for some strange reason, they started to break, probably because of the soil type or whatever engineering rationale that may come. But that was addressed. We had a good partnership with National Water Commission, and they came in and did their work. My question, though, EG, surrounds the work of NWC and how they work with NWA. I have gotten numerous complaints, and I've had situations where NWC will go in and they will fix a main, and when mains are broken, they are reported, and they do come in, and when they fix these mains, they would dig up the road and they will leave it. Now, at times, and I've had in recent times in my constituency, after they have left, would have had accidents, regrettably. Would have persons who are not aware that the road was dug up, and they're traversing at their usual speed, and they just meet up on something in the road, and they have to swerve. And I've had 2 bike accidents, in fact, over similar incidents. Now, the NWC is always saying they have a MOU with NWA. My question to you, to stop there, is how can you operationalize this MOU where as soon as these roads are dug up or repairs are undertaken, will NWA come in to do the repairs?
Thank you for that question, Mr. Wilson. Yeah, and I do bear the baggage or the burden of having spent many years at the NWC, so I'm very familiar with the challenges that the utility faces. But back in my time, by the time you pay JPSCO bill, you pay the insurance and you pay salary, there's very little money left to do other things. And I see now where the utility is more profitable, and so their disposable income to do other things is probably a little bit there. Yes, we do have an MOU, but again, an MOU is only as good as the resources available to be applied under the MOU. We have had some challenges of that MOU being funded. It is something that we work with the NWC. The NWC and ourselves, we are under the same ministry now, okay? And that has caused the synergies to be, greater synergies. There is extremely good relationship between the 2 entities. There's no acrimonious relationship. Perhaps, if anything, I have perhaps too much sympathy for the difficulties that they may have. What it is that we did have a floor in the MOU that the amount in the account should not go below a certain amount. Unfortunately, it has a significant deficit. It all comes down to funding. What I have said to government at the end of the day is that, when the public is traversing a road and there's a hole, nobody dissects it to say, well, this is an NWA hole or it is an NWC hole. They just see it as a government hole. And so my position is that just the same way that Parliament votes money to our parent ministry for us to do road repairs, I really do believe that Parliament should vote at least a minimum amount to the utility for the utility to be able to, vote it to the utility, but in our custody or in the PS's custody for us to be able to respond to fixing this road. Because if it is going to depend on the NWC revenue stream, their monthly collection and paying their rent and paying their this and so on and so forth, there will be challenges. I hope I'm not speaking out of turn because I can't speak for the NWC. But from where I sit, money is the issue. Money is the issue. because the contractors that we use to do the repairs, if you owe them and you can't pay them, they're not going to respond. And to the extent that you pay them, they'll respond. So the work is not a difficult work technically, it's just money. So to the extent that the parliamentarians would see some merit in my suggestion, and for the next budget cycle, put up $1 billion to my PS for custody and for it to be used by us to repair cuts, we'll be happy to do that. Starting in Central St. Mary, which happens to be my home. Yes. Oh, Westmoreland, that's right behind there. Right behind there. Right behind.
You have more questions, member? All right, I have 2 questions, and I'm conscious of the time. Mr. Hunter, can you explain the role of the NWA in the monitoring and the supervision of the contractor in relation to these major projects? There is, I would say, some controversy may not be the right term, but a gray area in relation to your role vis-a-vis the consultant who is assigned by the NWA to monitor the contractor. So I'd like some clarity as to where the NWA's role starts, where it ends, and what the role of that independent consultant is in that process.
Okay, so Chairman, thanks for that question. And it's a question that a lot of people have asked me, and I'm still trying to arrive at, an understanding. Okay, so this is the mid-peak contract. And as counsel will tell you, once you enter into a contract, it is this that matters. No other consideration is germane. So this document here speaks to, this document here is a lift from this document. Now this document, upside down, conditions of contract for construction. This is a FIDIC document. FIDIC is an acronym for International Federation of Construction Consulting Engineers, used in 120 countries worldwide, and it's listed here. So a contractor coming from China knows what to expect. Yesterday we met with some financiers from Saudi Arabia. They know what to expect. You go to Russia, they know what to expect. So this is the international standard. What the international standard says is that there is a prescribed role for the engineer, a prescribed role for the contractor, a prescribed role for the owner. Chairman, it is very much like our legal system. For justice to be dispensed, you have to have a competent judge, you have to have a jury if it's a jury trial, and you have lawyers, tripartite. If one person does his job and the other two don't do their job, you have a problem. So, under FIDIC, similarly, the contractor must do his job, the owner must do his job, and the engineer must do his job. The engineer's role, the engineer is employed by the owner, but the law goes on to say, notwithstanding the fact that he's employed by the owner, he's not the owner's man, meaning, in addition to a supervisory role, he also has an arbitral role, meaning, as a professional, he has to give a fair interpretation and a fair resolution to any matter that comes to him. I know a lot of people find that hard to believe because they say the engineer is employed to the government, therefore you must always sit the government side. No. And there's a bunch of case law from the Privy Council that affirms that position. So what's the rule? Whenever a contract is awarded, Chairman, members, if you look at the bills of quantities, one of the first items is what's called the contractor superintendent, meaning the government pays the contractor to employ the right staff to implement the contract. And the contractor, in signing the contract, warrants to perform this contract whether or not anybody else intervenes. So the contractor's obligation is not a contingent obligation. It's an obligation in law that says, I will perform what is in this, whether or not anybody visits the site. Now, what it is that the owner usually employs an engineer to see to it that the contractor does what the contractor signs up to do. but not for the engineer to do what the contractor is to do. You can't do that. We don't have the power in law to go in and pour concrete or whatever. So what the engineer does, he looks at the work, supervises it, not in terms of telling the contractor, this is what you do, this is what you do, but to see whether the contractor does what is in the contract, and then when the time comes for the contractor to be paid, the engineer makes recommendation to the owner of what the contractor should get paid. So if the contractor doesn't do what the contract says, the engineer will not recommend that payment. Again, what the contract allows for and what FIDIC allows for, if the contractor is not in agreement with the engineer's judgment, you go to the dispute resolution.
All right, let me ask you. So when the engineer who is employed by the owner, which is the government of Jamaica, fails to properly carry out his or her responsibilities. So let's use a live example. Let's use the highway to St. Thomas, which has had multiple problems in terms of whether it's dust nuisance, a whole set of issues. So much so that the Prime Minister directed you personally to supervise it. My question here is, who in the process, is it the engineer that fell down in terms of project management to ensure there's coordination between the water, the sewage, the road, etc.? Who would have had that responsibility? Because you are saying it is not NWA's responsibility to provide the supervision. Again, so where does it fall?
Again, Chairman, you're conflating a couple of things. The issues on the St. Thomas Road had nothing to do with engineering supervision. It had to do with contractor performance. Now, I have said here on many occasions that what the country needs is a contractor performance apparatus where contractors can be rewarded or penalized for not carrying out what they have warranted to do. And I've said that openly. Chairman, no, right now, to get any project through the government system, it requires an elaborate planning thing through the PIAB and so on and so on. We're doing all of that. But I'm telling you, at the end of the day, we're only as good as a contractor who we employ, okay? So, dust nuisance, what the engineer can do, and let me be clear. If there is a dust nuisance, the engineer instructs the contractor, and that's what so if you look through the files, you'll see a plethora of instructions from the engineer to the contractor. That is how it works. If the contractor does not conform to the instruction of the engineer, in very unique circumstance, the engineer can get the work done by somebody else. But again, that's a difficult call, because if you're going to introduce a second contractor in a contractor's space, issues of his insurance and liabilities, it becomes very difficult. So generally, you try to get the contractor to do what he's supposed to do. And in every contract, it tells you that the contractor shall set up the traffic management system, he shall keep dust, wet the road and do all of these things. The overall challenge on the St. Thomas Road, as we discovered on Mid-P, and I've said this publicly and I'll admit it again, historically, we have done sector projects, meaning road sector, water sector, IT sector. On the Mid-P, for the first time, we combine water and road. What that then required is an ambidextrous contractor who can do both. The contractors who work for the Water Commission don't work for NWA, and the contractors who work for NWA General don't work for the Water Commission. They're two separate sets. So what it is that the contractors who were nimble enough to take onto themselves additional subcontracting skill sets and specialists were able to manage. Because it's not all the subcontractors had problems. Some did well, some didn't. And when you analyze their modus operandi, the duality of the requirements was a little bit too much for some. Should we have seen that beforehand? That's a fair of thing. But back to your original question, the role and function of the engineer is to ensure that the contractor does what he contracts to do, and if he doesn't do it, A, he doesn't get paid, and B, if you can't persuade him to do it, then you bring in somebody else to do it. But you can't do it yourself.
All right, members, we're going to have to wrap here. There's another committee waiting us, and there are two matters I need to discuss in AOB, but let me thank the members from NWA, the Ministry, and the Auditor General's Department for being here. And you can excuse yourselves now. Thank you. Yes. And I just ask the members for 2 minutes after the public servants leave. Let's call that gentleman. Members, we're not finishing up. Just 2 minutes, don't leave. There are just two matters. I just ask the public servants if you can just excuse yourselves, please. Our members, there are three matters I want to raise. One relates to the PICA report from the Auditor General. Based on the Auditor General's findings from the report, there was no adverse finding from the PICA audit. And as such, I'm not recommending that we bring PICA here. So I just want the concurrence or the opinion of the members on that we do not invite PICA to appear before us based on the findings. Concur? Okay. Secondly, oh, sorry.
I agree, but there was a particular matter that I'm sorry the Auditor General has gone, because in reading the report, there was a conflicting statement about assessing the senior managers when there was no need to have, there was not competitive bidding, as it were, for the job, you know. But next time when she comes back, I'm sure I can ask her that.
You mean the three appointments where there was no need? You just want some further information on that. Secondly, in relation to Transport Authority report, Parliament has written to Member Sibley's on that.
Just want to understand Member Guy's comment earlier. Is it seeking further clarification, or is it that while you are seeking further clarification, the PICA will be in attendance?
No, what I understood from Member Guy, there was one section of the report which related to 3 senior managers who were appointed without a competitive process. The Auditor General indicated that within the staff orders, it allows for that. I think what Member Guy was asking for was some further details on that, but I don't think it requires PICA to come here for that.
If I may, Chair. No, I don't think it's something that requires PICA to be here. Something that the Auditor General in the report seemed an anomaly to me, so I just want for my own purpose.
Very well.
In relation to the Transport Authority, Parliament has written, the clerk has written to the Transport Authority and has given them until the 20th of October to respond to the final report. Once we receive those, we will schedule the meeting with the Transport Authority. And then the final issue, based on what you had said, Member Sibley's, relates to ensuring that the responses from the MDAs are made available to the public. I had indicated, and I think there was general consensus, that the report should be put on the Parliament's website so that the public can view it. You had raised a particular concern related to just the reconciliation. So thus, if you can elucidate on that particular point.
Yes, Chair. I think one of the things that need first to be agreed or to be understood is the process by which the communications between the Auditor General's Department and the auditees, that is the MDAs, and to get a full understanding. Because if that is not properly understood by all ministry departments and agencies, you might find that a step might be overlooked. Because based on what happened today, I'm not sure if between the final document being sent to the Parliament, if there was a meeting with the head of agency to discuss the final, what would have been the final set of findings, or what would have been agreed as going forward. And so I want to have that clear in my mind, and it being cleared in the ministries, department, and agency before we are having these responses from the auditees being tabled, and it create much more unnecessary discussion, speculations, and unnecessary disruption in the process of the Auditor General's.
All right, what I'm going to ask for, just to ensure that we're all on the same page, I will ask the clerk to ask the Auditor General to provide to us in writing the specific steps from when there's a draft report, the interaction with the ministry, agency, and department, to a final report, and then the opportunities that are provided to that entity to respond before the report is sent here to Parliament. We know once the report is sent here, the Parliament, through the clerk, gives the agency an opportunity to respond after. So what I will do is ask the Auditor General to document that process so that we are all on the same page as to exactly what happens during that process.
And so then we can state very clearly that it is at this particular stage, that particular response from the ministry, department, and agency will be adopted and put on the website.
Chair.
Member Guy.
Might I suggest, therefore, that in light of what you have just indicated to us, that we delay this particular decision and flesh it out a little in our own minds, and in the next meeting we make a decision.
Agreed. So we'll await the written response from the Auditor General, and then at our next meeting we can finalize it. Can I have a motion for the adjournment?
So move.
Member Chin, and seconded by Member Cousins. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
What if I told you that you own thousands of acres of land, more than 100 companies with over 100,000 employees, and billions in the bank? Well, I have news for you. You do. Jamaica belongs to you, and you need expert protection to safeguard those assets for your future, your children, and your children's children. And you already have it. A key protector is our Auditor General, whose role is outlined by the biggest, baddest law in all the land, the Constitution. The Auditor General's main job is to examine the financial reports of all public entities to ensure that they are accurate and that public funds are used appropriately and effectively to deliver public goods and services without waste, theft, and mismanagement. Here's how it's done. A team of highly trained auditors reviews and verifies that the right amount of money is spent on only what's approved in the national budget and in accordance with the laws and policies that protect public resources. Now, the right amount of money can be spent on the right things and Jamaicans still no benefit. So the Auditor General assesses the outcome for programs and projects as well. Audit reports will also contain recommendations to improve the operations of the audited entity, and the findings are submitted to the Parliament's Public Accounts Committee, the PAC. Every year, an annual report is submitted by December 31. Both government and opposition MPs serve on the PAC, and they summon public entity managers to answer questions so that they and the public, the real owners, yes, you, can understand what went wrong and how to prevent a recurrence. What are some things that can and do go wrong? Cost and time overruns, missing financial reports, unreported losses, unauthorized spending, unsupported payments, unlawful contracting, undisclosed conflict of interest, and more. Though the AG identifies the abuse of laws and policies, the law does not empower that office to penalize or sanction, but it does empower the Financial Secretary in the Ministry of Finance. It is also the duty of other anti-corruption and law enforcement bodies to grab the button and investigate to ensure penalties are applied when appropriate. But the AG alone can't watch all. So when things don't look straight, the Minister of Finance, members of Parliament, Cabinet, public servants, and importantly, you must blow the whistle and the AG will look deeper. So this is where you come in, with 4 things you can do to strengthen those who are fighting to protect our future. Tune into PBCJ on Tuesdays for the PAC and mind your business, Jamaica. It's our belongings, but we have to move like we understand that. And next time you hear a news report about the AG, just left it up to the media. Visit the AG's website at www.auditorgeneral.gov.jm and check out the findings yourself. Then, keep track of how government has fixed the issue, or not, at www.jampja.org's accountometer. And if you're not happy with what you see, it's your job to contact your employees. It's easy when you visit the MP tracker on jampja.org. This is how we can do our part to make Jamaica land we own, Jamaica land we love, and Jamaica land we run well. A message from the Jamaica Accountability Meter portal, funded by the